I've always loved the idea of knights, and I've loved the stories of the knights of the Round Table, King Arthur and Camelot, and the idea, and of course these legends, these myths, always have something of a basis in reality. They correspond to truth, to the real world in many ways. This idea of those knights who by honour and by covenant and by promise bind themselves to act to defend their king and country, to defend their people, to defend their lands and property, even at the peril of losing their own lives. They're bound by a cause, by a great cause, and they live not for themselves but for honour and integrity. They are knights of a code who have promised that they will sustain the truth and that they will live in defence of others, those who are weak or vulnerable or unprotected, that they will protect them. And I love this idea. And in the scriptures, of course, we have true knights, what I call knights of light. They are those who act in defence and protection of others. They are strong, they are brave, they are courageous, they are faithful to Christ, they are loyal disciples, they are followers of God. They don't seek for power and authority, but they seek to do good and to be good. One of these was the man Moroni, Captain Moroni. We're told in Alma chapter 48, we're given a description about him and some of the attributes of his nature. Moroni was a strong and a mighty man. He was a man of a perfect understanding, yea, a man that did not delight in bloodshed, a man whose soul did joy in the liberty and the freedom of his country and his brethren from bondage and slavery, a man whose heart did swell with thanksgiving to his God for the many privileges and blessings which he bestowed upon his people, a man who did labour exceedingly for the welfare and safety of his people. He was a man who stood in the face of danger with courage. He had courage under fire, and according to this description, he wasn't interested in killing people. He didn't seek for power or dominion or riches or lands or property. What he sought for was the knowledge of God. He understood God and his plan. He was a strong man, but he used that strength to bless others, to serve, to defend his king, his people, his righteousness, his family, his friends. He rejoiced in liberty and freedom. He wanted to be free to follow God and to keep God's commandments. He didn't want his people to be slaves, to be in bondage, to be afflicted and killed. And so he was willing to defend them. In fact, he was full of thanksgiving to God. He had a big heart, and he loved God, and he loved freedom, truly loved freedom. The freedom not to do whatever we like, the freedom to kill and to murder and maim, but the freedom to bless, the freedom to build, the freedom to work and to worship and to build a family and to serve and to have a house, and the freedom to do what's right. He worked exceedingly for the welfare and safety of his people. What a great man. He wanted to protect his people. He wanted them to have a good life, a life where they could follow God according to the dictates of their conscience, a life where they could worship God, where they could be in their families, they could grow their crops, and they could perform their trades and sell goods and buy goods and feed their families and do the things that were right. That's a good thing. That's a righteous thing. And here was a man who was using his strength and his intelligence and his knowledge to protect his people, his religion, his God, his land. He was fighting for the right, fighting for the truth, a man of valor and integrity and honor. What an example to us. And this continues to be pertinent in our own day. We are called upon to be true, to be faithful, to stand for that which is right and good, to stand against those things which are bad. And I just think it's wonderful that he was a knight in shining armour, if we like, the true definition of that word, where he was able to sustain and defend his people, to fight for their freedoms and their protections, and to use his body and his mind and his heart and his soul to stand for a cause, the great cause of God, the cause of Christ. He was a man of Christ, a man whom the devil couldn't prevent from doing good. He was resistant to evil. He was resilient in the face of persecution. He was willing to lose his life. And freedom, that spiritual freedom, we have to be willing to sustain and defend. And so I love Captain Moroni, and I love the fact that the Book of Mormon teaches us of him and how we can be knights of light. We can stand for truth and righteousness and virtue and integrity and honor. And that's appropriate and relevant in this day and age. How wonderful that God has given us that opportunity.